Alrighty, first thing I want to mention, semester projects. We have about 4 weeks left. We'll only have 3 weeks if you wait and start until after next week, which is the due date for picking a project. So I would pick a project and go ahead and upload your choice and start working on it pretty fast rather than, wait until you upload this and then go on. They're not designed to be too hard. Some, of course, are harder than others. And there's one of these that I actually need to delete down here at the bottom. I'll make the change. It references Python, and that's not our goal here. So, as I mentioned here, some of these projects are more difficult than others. I wouldn't choose a project just because it seems easy. I would pick one that interests you. And if it's easy, so much the better, right? So baseball. And I know Troy has seen some of these in the past, but other people have not had any of my classes where I required projects. And there'll be some different ones in here as well for those who have. So what does baseball do? Kind of wish this was on a white background, but I'm not going to take the time to figure out how to do that. I think I know. All right. Not sure if that's better or not. So the game will use random numbers to decide whether the batter strikes out or gets a home run or whatever. So you have a lot of freedom in this one. I'm imagining something like this. Welcome to the baseball simulator. How many innings do you want to play? Team 1, batter 1. Strike, 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 you're out. That was 1 out of 3 strikeouts. Score 0-0. Team 1, batter 2. Strike, strike, home run. Woot, we got a score. So the score is 1-0. Team 1, batter 3. Strike, 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 you're out. That was 2 out of 3 strikeouts. The score is still 1-0. Team 1, batter 4. Home run. Score is 2-0, and so on. So just like baseball, and I'm not a big baseball expert, 3 strikeouts ends the inning for that team. It plays for a total of 9 innings. And so really, basically, once you start the program, unless you decide to make it interactive, it's just going to run and do all 9 innings right by itself. So you could make it a lot more complex than shown above, not just strikeouts and home runs, but, making players do singles, doubles, which player is on which base, so on. However complicated you want to make it. So write a football simulator. Can I reduce the size of the ruler here so that the margins here? Yeah, now we're talking. Just like the other button. Use random numbers to determine how many yards a team gets each time. Sometimes they should fail to get any, right? They might even lose yards. Failure to get 10 yards and 4 downs causes the other team to get the ball. And I have no idea why it keeps underlining that and wants me to replace that with loose with 2 O's, but whatever. So you could assume that the game ends after 60 plays. 15 plays per quarter, perhaps. It's not too far from the truth. In a pro football game, the ball is usually in play for an average of 12 minutes in a 90-minute game, with each play averaging about 11 seconds of action. The rest of them is people setting up, getting into position, stuff like that. Or you might implement random amounts of time, right? Whatever you want. You have complete freedom to make the game simple or complex. Will it support passes as well as runs? Will it support field goals and touchdowns, extra point kicks? Would passes earn more yards but fail more often? You get to decide all that, right? Hangman, classic game of Hangman. Implement a game of Hangman. The computer picks a word and the player guesses letters until they fill in the word or runs out of guesses. Let's say 10 guesses cause failure, right? Ends the game. Or you could pick fewer if you want to be mean. And here I post like 20 warnings in a row. Don't cheat on this one, because there are 8 billion Hangman programs you can look at on the internet. It's a very common programming problem, right? So quite often in the past, when I do offer this project, people wait until the last minute to try to write it, and then they get desperate and download code from the internet, and then they fail the course. Don't do that, right? Trust me, I can tell, and I can usually find the exact site that the code came from. Don't wait until the last minute and get desperate. It's better to turn in no project at all than cheat. If you do get stuck, I'll be happy to provide a flowchart to help you on this one. Once you have the flowchart, it's not that hard to write. Not a difficult project if you have the flowchart. But try it yourself first. So I repeat, I mean it. Don't download a Hangman program from the internet and submit it as your own work. Of course, you're always able to go out and try to, find things that'll help you, right? If you need to figure out how to store, take the letters in a string and convert them into an array or something like that, you can find bits and pieces, but you're not going to take the whole program and upload it. So why am I going on and on about this? It's because it happens almost every semester. It just happened last semester in the scripting class, and it's a real drag. Right? I don't like failing people or, filing an academic dishonesty report. And in that particular instance, the student was failing the class anyway. So, yeah. Anyways, the alternate would be to just not offer the project at all, but I don't want to do that. Some students enjoy writing the program. Java Fighter. Are you an RPG fan, a role-playing game fan? I give you simple rules. You can implement a game. 2 fighters, they each have an attack, strength, and an armor rating. And they fight until one player is reduced to 0 or fewer hit points. Or you can make the idea better, make up your own rules. Just make sure they're not so simple as, that they're ridiculous. Flipping a coin to decide who wins or loses would not be enough, right? So one student programmed a Pokemon match. Well, this was in Python, but I'm sure you could do it in Java as well. The only interesting thing is I've never written a program in Python that would play a sound. In Java that would play a sound. But they did a Pokemon match where you chose your attack, you chose your Pokemon, the computer chose theirs. It was a pretty cool project. Another student I don't know why I wrote that in that tense, implemented Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder attack and damage rules. I need to rewrite that sentence, right? Anyways, so my rules. Your character and your opponent's characters have 2 attributes, strength and armor. The program asks for these values for you and the opponent. Each round, the characters roll dice, and the one with a larger number damages the one with a smaller number. And that damage is inflicted on the loser's strength. When that strength drops to 0, the character is defeated. So how do you determine how many dice? The number of dice is determined by the strength. It's strength divided by 10, rounded up. You can find a math function in the math library that'll round up. It's the ceiling function. Damage. Damage is calculated as the difference between a high and a low roll. Luke rolls a 12 and Darth Vader rolls a 10, then Vader's going to take 2 points of damage. If any damage is there, it's going to get subtracted from the strength. But the armor can help. Before the damage is applied, the armor rating of the loser is subtracted from the damage to be awarded. So Luke rolls a 20, Darth Vader rolls a 12. Luke has no armor, Darth Vader has 5 points of armor. 20 minus 12 is 8, which is what Darth would have taken. But the 5-point armor reduces that to 3, right? Because 8 minus 5 is 3. Good armor might reduce the damage to 0. Since Luke has 0 points of armor, he never gets reduced damage. Poor guy. He better use the Force. After damage is applied, if any, the next round begins. Note that if the characters have armor values that are too high, the game could go on forever. And by the way, if you've taken another one of my courses that required projects and you've already written this and you feel like writing it in Java now, you can do that. I don't mind. Figure out how to prevent the game from going on forever, right? Because if their armor is too high, then neither one will ever take any damage. Maybe the game just ends after a certain number of turns with no damage. Maybe every attack does at least 1 damage to the loser. Maybe every time somebody wins, the loser's armor is reduced by 1, right? Something like that. Maybe every time a die rolls a 6, it's counted as a critical hit that automatically awards damage, regardless of who wins or loses. And by the way, I've noticed that once one side begins to lose, the game may end very quickly, right? Because as the strength lowers, the number of dice that they roll lowers, and so it can become catastrophic pretty fast. Xor Cipher, 2 different versions, simple and advanced. Now, this is not true. The book does not give us Xor Cipher. I need to edit this description a little bit. A Xor Cipher is one where the characters get shifted, right? So if I type in Abraham and I want to shift everything by 2, an A becomes a C, right? Because C is 2 past A. A B becomes a D because a B is 2 past whatever, right? And QRST, A becomes a C because it's 2 past that HIJ, whatever, right? You get the idea. 2 past A is C, 2 past M, M and O, there, right? And so if this was my input and I said I wanted to do a shift of 2, it would come out like that. I can give you more documentation on this project if you want. I can give you an entire document for, you know, the rules on it for Java. I probably should go ahead and do that. But then that one's a pretty common cipher and it's incredibly easy to crack, right? All you have to do is write a loop that would shift over and over and over until, you know, you see the whole, you know, the sentence pops out at you. And so another more complicated one, but the shift increases by 1 each time. So if you had this string, A, B, C, D, right? And you said shift by 1, the first one would go to a B, but the second one would shift by 2 and become a D. The third one would shift by 3, so C, D, E, F. And the fourth one would shift by 4, right? D, E, F, G, H, right? Like that. And so both of these algorithms can break as the shift value is too large or the text is too long. Think about why. You don't have to fix that. It's just that once the numbers get too large, then the wraparound, which you have to support, kind of breaks down. Why do you have to support wraparound? Because if you're doing ASCII chart, ASCIItable.com, internal server error. Wow, I've never seen that site go down. Find a good one. All right. So anyways, if you have a lowercase z, right, which has an ASCII value of 121, and you shift it up by 10, it becomes a 131. Well, that's past the end of the printable characters. The highest character we want to support is 126. So since it went from 121 to 131, 126 is how many more than 121? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then we need to jump down to the lowest printable character, which is 32. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that lowercase z would turn into a $sign. And when I upload the document, it'll make that real clear. So if anything goes above 126, you need to subtract 94 from it to get it back down to 32. And if it's less than 32 and it's in all these control characters, it needs to add 94 to it to get back into the printable alphabet characters. There are versions of Xor Cipher that are simpler than that and don't handle that kind of wraparound. I want you to write one that does. And I don't want you to download Xor Cipher from the internet. That's another one that you can find, all over the place. So both of these algorithms can break. Be careful how you implement the deciphering on the second version, because if you're supposed to increase by 1 every time, if you're shifting positive, if you're shifting negative, you better decrease by 1 every time. And then there's another one called Xor Cipher. What does Xor mean? It stands for exclusive OR. What is exclusive OR? I'm pretty sure we've already talked about that if you have some number like this and you're bitwise ANDing them, then it means that both bits in the column have to be on for the result to be on, right? And so in this first one right here, 0 and 1, only one of them is on, but AND requires both of them to be on, but only one of them is on, so that says 0. Here we have 2 that are on, right? 1 and 1. I don't know why it stopped making my text big. So since AND requires both of them to be true, it is. This one is a 0, and this one is a 0 because only one of them is true. Now, OR, a little bit different. If you're doing OR, as you recall, either one of them can be true for the result to be true, right? Just like if you are sick or You are tired, you get to stay home, right? Either one can be true for the result to be true. So none of these are going to wind up 0, as a matter of fact. I need to make one of them have 0 in both columns for it to result. So is one of these in this column true? Sure is. Is one of these in this column true? Sure is. What? Is one of these in this column true? Nope, neither one are true. And is one of these true? There. So that's bitwise OR. How about bitwise XOR, exclusive OR? Now that's one that we don't have a keyword for, but there's a symbol for it. You can look it up. I believe it's the up arrow, the shift 6 like that. It means that the result is 1 only if one of them is set, if one of them is true. If 2 of them are true, it's false. And that's kind of weird, but it's called exclusive OR. If one of them is true, doesn't matter whether it's the top or the bottom one, then the result is true and we put a 1. But if both of them are false, or both of them are true, then the result is false. So is one of these, one and only one of these true? Yeah, in that column they are. Is one and only one of these true? No. Is one and only one of these true? No. Is one and only one of these true? Yes. And so it's just kind of a little trivia that if you take a number and you bitwise OR it with something else, forgive me for doing it in Python, it's awfully easy to demonstrate it in Python, so I'm going to. If I take a number and bitwise it against another number, doesn't matter what, it's kind of a magic trick, and then I take that number and I bitwise exclusive OR it against the same number, it changes back into its original value, right? So we can use that for a cipher. We can just take every letter in it and bitwise exclusive OR it, right? And then it turns into another number. So 65 turns into whatever, I don't know what 65 exclusive OR, against the number 255 is, but there it is, it's 190. And if I take that number and I exclusive OR it against that same upper end, it gets back to being the original number. And so that's the point of that one. The output would look something like this. Please enter the string you want to encipher. Python. You can tell that this is my Python project list, but I'm using it for the Java class as well. I need to change my example. Specify the exclusive OR value between 0 and 255. Now, in this particular case, you're going to wind up with characters that can't be printed, right? Because our ASCII table, anything larger than 127 is not printable. Anything smaller than 32 is not printable. And when you exclusive OR, you can easily get values that are not printable. And that's okay. It just means that we're going to have to display our output as a series of numbers. So please enter the string to encipher. Please enter your exclusive OR value. And so here's what those ASCII values are before the encoding. If you look it up, a P, capital P is an 80, a capital Y is a 121, a capital T is a 116, and there's a nice little function, a nice way to get the integer value from a character. So this translation is not that hard. I would just put it into an array list. The data after encoding, after you do your exclusive OR with 255, that's what your new numbers are. And right, all of them are non-printable, so it's a good thing we're just displaying it as an array list. And then the data after decoding the data. Well, I want you to both encode it and then take that and decode it. It makes it real easy to eyeball to make sure the algorithm worked. And to decode it, you just exclusive OR it against that same number again. Honestly, this one's probably too easy. If you want, you can add a shift feature like a Xor Cipher, right? So if you shifted it and then exclusive OR'd it, right, it becomes even more difficult to figure out what it is. How about rock, paper, scissors? The user picks paper, scissors, or rock, and then the computer does that. So do it at random, I guess. If you can figure out some other cool way, I don't know. But it's no fair to make it based on what the user picks, right? You can't just look and find out that, oh, they chose scissors, well, I'm going to choose rock. That's not fair. Hope you know the rules for paper, scissors, rock, right? One person chooses paper, the other person chooses scissors. Well, scissors cut up the paper, so scissors wins. You can look them up if you don't know them. Best 2 out of 3 wins, ignoring ties. I assume you know the rules. For more fun, implement paper, rock, paper, scissors, Lizard-Spock. Now, this is a pretty strange one. It's a 5-way game rather than a 3-way game. You can look up the rules. It was featured on The Big Bang Theory. That's what popularized it, that TV show. A password validator. Write a program that asks the user for a password and it checks according to its normal rules, but it has to do 2 checks. One is to make sure it's 8 or more in length. It has at least 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 digit, and 1 punctuation. But if it passes that one, it opens a file that contains a list of common passwords. And if any of the common passwords are part of the user's password, it's rejected. You can probably find a huge file of common passwords, right? But I'll be happy to give you one. For example, if you typed in the password June XYZ exclamation mark, well, XYZ may be a common password, or June may be a common password. So if June was a word listed in the file of common passwords, it would be rejected as unsafe. And then the user must be told that their password is good or not and told why. So a linked list, this is the one that I'm deleting completely. Word and letter histograms. Write a program that will open a text file, read it in, and process it to determine how many times each word occurs and how many times each letter occurs. Have your program remove all punctuation and digits from the file and converting all the lowercase letters so that if you have the word the with an uppercase T and a word the that was all lowercase, it wouldn't be counted differently. So once all that processing is done, print out in order the words from most common to least common. And then print out in order the letters from most common to least common. This can and probably should be done with dictionaries. Well, we don't call them dictionaries, right? In this particular language, we call them maps. And if you understand dictionaries and are good with Google to find out how to sort a map by value, not keys, it may not be a difficult project. Or your own project. If you have an idea, you can mail it to me. I wouldn't wait until the upload at the end, right? I'd do so pretty quickly and send me a text saying you did so. Make it interesting. Not too easy, not too hard. If it turns out to be too hard, despite your initial prediction, you could always change your mind, right? And then do Hangman, right? Or, one of the other ones that look easy to you. And if I give you Hangman and if I give you the flowchart for Hangman, it really does become pretty easy to do. I'd rather you submit a good, honest effort, even if not fully functioning of your original idea. And that's what I talk about here in complete projects. Warning, don't bite off more than you can chew. You might not be able to finish you might not be able to finish your project by week 16, then don't choose it, right? The projects are designed to be solvable in 4 weeks. Some would probably just take a day or 2 if you know what you're doing. But if it was your own project and idea, in such a case, I might accept a partial project. If it shows a lot of learning, if it looks like you actually put a lot of work in it, and it's in a somewhat working state, you can't just give me a bunch of lines that don't compile, and it has to compile and run and show at least some of what it was meant to do. So don't pick a project that's too hard. Don't say you got to write a chess game if that's completely beyond your abilities, right? That's a pretty complex thing. So, of course, those points are completely subjective. I get to decide whether, you put enough work in on it or not. And don't plan on turning in an incomplete project. It's just an emergency outlet. Given this semester's unique challenges, I'm making the project mandatory, but it does count as 5% of the total grade. If you do a well-done project, I'm just going to make that one, then you can skip the final, right? I'll give you 100 for the final exam. All right. I hope that makes sense. Hope these are interesting enough. I left one of the projects out. I might upload it. It's called the monster array. And it's actually one of the things I want to talk about today, if we have time, is the idea of a 2-dimensional array and moving things around on it. So given that we have some time, why don't we go ahead and talk about that? I definitely need to save this file and re-upload it with its fixes. I will do that afterwards. Pick a project, upload a document saying what you're doing, and we're going to have a weekly, deadline, a weekly Dropbox so that you can upload your progress on it each week. That way, if you haven't made any progress at all, it's pretty obvious, right? Okay, so I want to demonstrate a two-dimensional array that can be used, if you're playing one of those games where everything is viewed from overhead, it's effectively a two-dimensional world, right? Maybe you've seen old games, like Rogue Text. I hope that I can find one really quickly, right? Where it's just drawn with characters, right? And then things could move around on the map like that. And nowadays there's a whole category of games called roguelikes, and they're not drawn with text characters, so I'm not sure what makes them roguelikes, but you're probably exploring something like that. You video game fans probably know a lot more about that than I do. So I'm going to make a NetBeans project. It's just going to be a normal, everyday one with a main. I believe we're on lecture Q. I know that I already have several lecture Qs, so I'm going to call it COT 2016 and their lecture Q, unique file name for it. All right, so if we have a two-dimensional file, array.
We're on S.
We're on S? Where'd I get Q from? I don't know. All right, right-click, rename. Address. Easy to fix. I thought I checked. All righty. Although Q seemed too low, so. All right, so you know that you can allocate an array one of two different ways, right? You could use an initializer list. Like if you have an array of ints, you could just do this, right? And it's got some numbers in it. Or you could allocate it, like that. That's also an array with two numbers in it. Three numbers in it. Well, let's do a trackpad. Let's do a two-dimensional array, right? I'm going to call it TA. And I could try to build, a representation of it like this. That's what one row looks like. That's what the next row looks like. And this is what the third row looks like. And then we just need to end our array with the final semicolon. All right, right? And that makes it kind of obvious what's going on. Like if you had an X here and you wanted it to go up by 1, you could do that, right? You would just have to change its row position, move it from row 2 to row 1. What if it was going to be a big map, a 10 by 10 map? I wouldn't want to allocate it like that. I wouldn't want to have to do that. So I would just do this, int, and I'm going to call it map. So int, brace, embrace, brace, embrace, map equals new int, and I want it to be 10 by 10. I know I'm going to need a function to print the contents of this out. It's just a given, right? So I'm going to come up here and add a method to print our array out. Public static void print map, right? We could just make map a member of the whole thing, but nah, I'm just going to make it. And so it accepts an array, a two-dimensional array. So we got 2 pairs of braces. May as well even give it the same variable name, although it wouldn't have to be. All right, and it's a nested loop. So for int r is equal to 0, r is less than the number of rows. Gosh, how do we get the number of rows? I believe we can just do this, map dot length. And then r plus plus, right? That'll give us the number of rows. except since this is an array and not an array list or a string, it's not a method, it's just a property of it. So I need to take those parentheses out that I just typed. Now for the inner loop, for int c is equal to 0, c is less than the length of that specific row. Map parentheses r dot length, semicolon, C++. And then we could print it out. But we don't want to go to the next line, right? Because we're stepping through all the columns in that row. So we're just going to use print rather than printf. System.out.print, right? And then we can print that value. So map subscript. I'm going to change things up a little bit here, though. I want to declare a character, and I'm going to set the character according to the values. What do I mean by that? Well, a 0 is kind of a blank value, so I could set it equal to a blank, right? And then if it's something else, oops, characters have to have single quotes around it. If it's something else, like it's a 1, then that could be, right? That could be your, we can make it a capital X or something like that. So if map r subscript c is equal to 1, then we're going to change our character to a capital X. Is that underlined for a reason? Oh, CH, right. And then we're going to print CH out. After that entire column, after that entire row has been printed, outside the inner for loop, we need to go to the next line. System.out.println, right. Don't even need to pass anything. Now, initially, a whole bunch of spaces will be kind of, hard to see, so I'm going to put dots there instead. So now that I have that, I need to call that, right? I'm going to come down here and print out my map. Let's print out the TA map first, right? Print map TA. And let's print out our larger map now. Print map map. If you ever see me move the window around, it's because the controls for the Zoom meeting happen to block that green button there. Anyways, it ran and it printed out our map, right? Here was our 3x3 map, and here was our other map. We didn't have a 1 in here anywhere, so it didn't print out an X. Well, let's just start our 1 out right here in the corner. So after I make my map, I'm going to set the first value equal to 1. So map 0, 0. Is equal to 1 because we decided that a 1 was equal to our character. And a 2 could be something else, right? And a 3 could be something else. All righty. Now when we print it out, we're going to see an X in the corner. We don't need to print out this small map anymore, so I'm just going to comment that out. Right? And there it is. I think I'd like this map to be a little wider than it is tall, because in this particular font, characters are taller than they are wide. So why don't I make it 10 by 20? All right. I like the way it looks. All right, now we're going to make it so that this guy can run around all over the place. It'd be neat if we could make it respond to keystrokes in real time. We could try to work on doing that, but all I'm going to do is ask the user which way they want to go, north, south, east, or west, or whether they want to quit, right? We're going to ask them that, and then we're going to redraw the map after having made our changes. So let's do a loop. I think I'll just make it a while true loop because that's the way my brain works. I know we're going to need a scanner. Oh, we have a bunch of participants now. Thanks, guys. Glad to see y'all here. All righty. I definitely need to add the import for the scanner. All right, let's ask them. System.out.print, parentheses, quote, north, south, whoops, where's my quote? North, south, east, west, or Q. And then let's get our choice. String choice equals sc dot next. That'll get the next string. And then we need to do some stuff based on that decision, whether we're going north, south, east, west, or quitting. Well, that's the easiest one to check, right? So if choice dot equals ignore case, well, let's just make them type uppercase. I guess we could convert it to uppercase before we did anything, right? So choice equals choice dot to uppercase. And then we can do a big switch statement, because in Java, you're allowed to switch on strings. So switch based on the choice. Case Q, colon. Now see, I should have checked for that beforehand, because if I use a break here, which is what I was planning on doing, then it'll just break the switch. It'll bail out of the switch. So let's just use one if statement. If choice dot equals parentheses quote Q, end quote, in parentheses, then break. So that doesn't need to be a choice. So let's just add our choices here. If they ask it to go north, why don't we call our, let's write some methods for moving north, south, east, and west. I think it'll be easier to do that than to stick all of this stuff inside switch. So go north, our map, right? So our method is definitely going to have to take our array. We really should have made our array a member of the class, right? A static member of the class so that we didn't have to pass it around anywhere. Case south, we're going to go underscore south with our map. Case east, we're going to go east with our map, in our map. In case west, we're going to go west. Go west, young man. I don't remember anything about American history except that a guy named Horace Greeley said, go west, young man. All righty, and then break. And I guess if they do none of the above, then we'll print out a message saying unrecognized choice, system.out.println, unrecognized choice, end quote, in parentheses, semicolon. All right, now obviously we don't have any of these methods yet. So to get our code to compile as quickly as possible, I'm going to go and create some empty methods that do that. So way up here, public static void go underscore west. That takes an array of ints, a two-dimensional array of ints. Not going to even do anything. I'm just going to copy and paste that and make an east, west, north, and south. Yeah, all right. I made several copies of it, right? Go east, whoopsie. Go east, go west, go north, go south. Okay, gang, is anybody typing along while I'm doing this and need me to slow down? I'm going to go ahead and run it, right? And it's asking me north, south, east, west, or Q. Well, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to go north. Yeah, great. It's not really doing anything, right? Because we made those empty methods. But let's think about it. If I go east, what do I need to do? I need to erase my X here, right? I need to set that particular cell to 0. And then I need to set that particular cell to 1. So I need to increment, the column number and come over here and add it to 1. Now, there's other ways that we could do this. We could have a player character that had X and Y coordinates. And I'm kind of wishing that I had done it that way now. In fact, I'm really wishing I had done it that way. I don't know why I implemented it this way. And what does that mean? Rather, I could just leave the array here and then have something else that keeps track of my X and my Y coordinates. It's not going to take too big of a change to get that to happen. So what am I going to do to get that to happen? I'm going to create 2 static variables inside my class. I could make one of those classes that has a position X, and an X position and a Y position like we always do. But why not just do this? Public static character X, right? Our character or our player's X position. And it's going to start off at 0. And public static player Y is equal to 0. And these are ints, and I forgot the word int. And if I made map a member of the class just like this, I wouldn't have to be passing it around everywhere. Might do that, make it a little bit easier. But I've already set it up the other way, so I'm going to leave it alone. That changes this thing a little bit, right? Because what we have to do is to check to see if we are at this current position. And if we are at that current position, then we're going to draw an X. So tell you what, why don't we just make it so that we're going to print out a string which is equal to the value of our map character. So empty string plus, or I could do integer dot toString with a capital S. I could do it the right way rather than that little hack of adding something to an empty string of our map at row column. Right, so we're going to print out a bunch of zeros. Later on, we can make it fancier and print out spaces and stuff like that, but I'm in a hurry to get it to work since I've changed directions here. What are you complaining about? Oh, I have a print statement way out here at the end, and that's going to go bye-bye. That's going to get moved. All right, so instead of doing that, I'm going to print out that string, system.out.print that string. But if this position is the X equals the X and Y position of our player, we don't want to print that number. We want to print our capital X. So if the row is equal to player X and our column is actually equal to our X position, right? Because that's how maps work and grids work in real life, is column, 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 it being the X. So if the column is equal to player X and the row is equal to player Y, then we're going to change our string. S is instead going to be a capital X. So we need to initialize our player somewhere on the screen, right? And here's my dummy mistake. I forgot to put 2 equals. Right now, our player is just starting off at 0, 0, and that's good enough. We will still wind up drawing an X in the corner of our screen. We don't need to do this anymore, but I guess I'm going to leave it there just to show something. All righty. So when we run it, I already have a copy of this running, and I don't see where. And there it is, right? Our X is in the corner. I want to move it east. Of course, I haven't implemented that. But if I want to move X, what do? I just add 1 to the player X value, right? Because that's going to move it east. If I want to move it west, what am I going to do? I'm going to subtract 1 from the X value. If I want to move west, then I'm going to add 1 to the Y value. In this world, the Y-axis increases as you go down. Oops, come back. So let's add an east and a south command. If we go east, all we need to do is to increase player X, right? And if we go south, all we need to do is to increase player Y. All right, so I'm going to go east. And I forgot to redraw the map each time. That was dumb. All righty. So we need to put the draw map at the top of our loop, right? We need to put the print map up at the top of our loop. So in main, in the top of our loop here, before we print out our question, we need to print the map. And we don't need to do that. So there's our X. We're going to move east. And you see that our X moved over 1. And since we had set that first position to be a 1, it's still a 1, right? We haven't actually changed our map. We're just moving around on it. And the data that shows us where we're moving is contained in 2 separate variables, those 2 integers. All right, now I'm going to move south. Our X is moved. I'm going to move east again. I'm going to move south again. South, 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 south. I've noticed something. Is it my imagination or is it moving diagonally?
Yeah, it's moving diagonally.
I don't know why. But here's the problem I was expecting to hit, which is what happens when you move past the edge of the array. It's just, you can't see it anymore. We've gone off the map. So we should probably check our position. And if it's, you know what, I think it's because I forgot to add break statements to my switch. Classic mistake. But anyways, once its row gets too large, we need to stop it if we want to keep it on the map, right? Once its Y position gets, once its X position gets too large, it exceeds the number of columns, we need to stop it. And we also need to put break statements in our cases. I can't believe I did that. You see what I was doing when I chose, well, I'm not sure why I was doing what it's doing. Yeah, I chose south, and so it went over here, and it also went east. All right, I think we're good there. To make this easier to debug, I'm going to reduce the size of our map. And let's make that size configurable with a couple more variables. the number of rows and the number of columns in our map. So public static int rows equals 3, comma, calls equals 3, right? Or I could give it a better name like map rows, right? Map rows equals 3, map calls equals 3. Now I need this so that our go south, go north, go east, go west cannot exceed those values. If they're going east, we want to make sure that they do not exceed or actually equal the maximum number of columns. So let's check. If, can I type? If player X is greater than or equal to map underscore calls, then it needs to be reset to map underscore calls minus 1, right? Because if you have an array from 0 to 9, that's an array that's of length 10. So player X equals decided it needed to pause for a while. Map calls minus 1. Hope that makes sense. If you have a length of 10, you can only get out to minus 1. You can only get out to, you know, if it's 10 long, you can only get to 9. Go south needs to do the same thing. If player X, excuse me, if the player's Y coordinate, right, is too large, we need to modify that. Now, maybe we could combine all of that into one function and just call that function, right? Called check or reset or something that does both of those things. Public static void check position or fix position, right? If we go too far in any direction, we need to fix that. I don't even need the map. As a matter of fact, I didn't need the map for any of these, right? I could go and remove all of these. I'll save that for the end. But let's do that. If, I'm just going to cut and paste here. If our X is greater than the number of columns, then set it equal to calls minus 1. I'm going to paste it and make it say, if player X is less than 0, that's also a problem. So set it equal to 0. Now, if the player's Y value, we need to do the same checks, right? So I'm going to copy both of these statements. Why do you keep highlighting that? I don't know. It's got that in color for some important reason, I'm sure. And so now I'm going to check Y against the rows. Maybe I should have called it max rows rather than map rows, right? And again, if it's, make sure I get them exactly right, you know, all separated into the X and separated into the Y. Quite often when I copy and paste, I mess that up. Okay, now all I have to do is call fixed position once, right? Or I could call it in every single one of these, but that's duplicate code. Why not? Fix underscore position. And I'm going to do that in every one of these methods. So if you're going west, you're going to subtract 1 from player X. So player X minus minus. If you're going north, you're subtracting 1 from the Y. Player Y minus minus, and then fix the position. If you're going south, you add 1 to the Y coordinate and fix position. All right, I think we have a good program now. I think our thing can move around. And that's actually about far enough to take this, I believe. right? So I'm going to move south. What did it do? I guess I didn't have my cursor in the right place. South, our X moves. Wouldn't it be neat if we could clear the screen, or what? Wouldn't it be neat if we changed this into a JFrame application that drew this on the screen? You could do all that. South, south, right? My little X is wandering further and further south. No, he's not. I want somebody to tell me, if you can, what I did wrong. And the problem is, I have this, but what did I forget to change?
Yeah, you forgot to call the variables later.
I forgot to use that, correct, to create the map. I really don't need to make this little baby array anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that one. I don't really need these arrays anymore, so I'm going to get rid of those. But this needs to be map rows, and this needs to be map calls. All right, so my X is in the corner. I'm going to move south. I'm going to move south. Now it's at the edge, so it better not let me move south again. It did not. Good. I could have printed a message like, ouch, you know, or something like that. Don't wander off the map. Now I'm going to go east, east. I'm going to move east one more. Nope. Good. It stayed there. I'm going to go north, north, west, and west one final time. Now, what would be the last interesting thing to do? Would be to check our position. And if we're setting on something other than 0, then do something, right? Maybe he's moving around a map eating things, right? And so he could, as soon as we moved on to that spot, we could print a message, you know, I have eaten this or whatever. And then we could change that value. Now, I don't feel like making those changes, but we could do that. All I want to do now is to do a little bit of cleanup. And I said that we no longer need to pass this map around anymore if we made it a static member. I'm going to leave that alone, but we certainly do not need to pass it into go north, go south, go east, go west, because they don't even touch the map. All they do is update X and Y. And now I need to go and modify those methods to not accept that parameter anymore. So in our print map here, if it's a 1, let's do something a little more impressive than that. So if s dot equals a 1, then let's change our string equal to, I don't know, a question mark. And then after we move, let's check to see our position and see if we are sitting on a question mark. Something to that effect. You know what? I think I'm just going to leave it there. I think I'm not going to take it any further. For one thing, we're running out of time. But maybe you get the idea of how one of those games like that could be written now, right? This is just a big array. And the different values in it are chosen, you know, it's drawn based on the values that are stored in the array. And then each one of these special features is probably, it's either encoded directly into the array or there are independent values somewhere, right? You know, you could make an array list of objects and you would check them all, but it's probably easier just to encode them directly into the array. All right, I hope that was entertaining. I hope that some of y'all were able to type along with it or go back and play with it a little bit at least. I made those changes. Did I actually break the code? I better run it and find out. All right, so when I move south, I see that 1 there. I thought I'd changed it, but I guess I didn't. Come back. And let's make it so that if it was 0, oh, that's because I didn't put quotes around it. Else if s dot equals a 0, let's just change it to a dot. We're just pretty printing our display. We're making it look a little bit better. All right, move south, right, go back north, go back north. Now the monster array project, which I'm going to upload, is just to create an array, put some random numbers on it, and then have a, you could call it the player character or a monster, the same idea, move to find the largest value on the array. And as it moves, it eats everything, changing those numbers like to 0. And then once it has found the largest value on the map, then it looks for the next largest and it moves over there 1 by 1 by 1. And eventually it will have, you know, erased the entire map. Everything will be a 0. So that's kind of a fun project in my opinion. All right, gang, are we good? Any questions over this? Any questions over the project idea?
I'm good.
Not right now.
All righty, good deal. Now, anytime that you do have questions, now that we're getting into the Zoom swing, you know, you can send me a text message. I can fire up Zoom and we can bounce messages. You could even share your screen with me, right, if you're stuck on something, or I can share my screen with you, or we can take turns switching screens, you know, from one to the other. When you dial into Zoom, by default, it's not sharing your screen. So don't worry that I'm looking, you know, at your screen, but you can choose to do so. All right, let's make a Dropbox and be done. So I will see y'all next lecture. I did assign the homework for the last lecture. We only had the crow, but I'd like to modify it. You don't have to go back and change it if you've already done it, so that you also have a duck and a chicken, right? So you have 3 birds rather than 1. I just think that that would be more fun. So I'm going to go and modify the instructions just a little bit to do that. Who's already uploaded it? Who's already turned it in?
I did it. Lindy did it, but I did have 2 birds.
All righty. Well, if you feel like it, you could go back and add, you know, all 3 birds, but you don't got it since you've already done it.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So I will see y'all on Tuesday. Please contact me if you need help picking a project or have questions or want clarity on one. And I'll see you then.
All right.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.